of a problem of how these species are actually affecting each other when they're in the proximity of each other. So just
2 minutes, Alvin, please.
yeah, and I'm almost done. Just to conclude this, so I would say that most scientists agree now that fish as a group cannot be rejected as non-sentient beings, and we need to inform people about this. The validation of the effectiveness through consciousness measurements of different methods used to study fish is ongoing, but this will take time. It's a complex matter, and it's a lot of new systems being developed that are lagging behind in how they've been tested. And also I want to lift up how we can actually use these novel sensors and technique to assess, to see how the fish actually perceive their environment and events that are happening in their environment. And of course, I've not been alone in doing a lot of this work, so these are people in the platform.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alvin. Very interesting technical viewpoint. I'm now going to hand over, he's just up, Niall Gerlitz from the European Commission. He works in the Directorate General for Health and Food Safety, and he helped shepherd the report that Alvin already mentioned on the welfare of farmed fish. So he's going to be discussing fish welfare in the context of this report. Thank you, Niall.
Thank you, Barbara. I'll try to keep to time. So, as Barbara introduced, yes, I'm working with the Director General for Health and Food Safety. Our office is actually based in Ireland, and it's primarily responsible for audit and evaluation of member states and third countries in terms of their implementation of legislation. And indeed, this legislation that we're talking about here, regulation, need help?
Pointed here.
Is it possible for you to change the slide stuff? No.
If you just say slide or give me an order. Oh.
Okay, so the regulation 1099/2009, there was a requirement in that the Commission would send a report to the Parliament outlining the various possibility of introducing certain requirements at the time of slaughter, animal welfare requirements. So I just wanted to outline this report very quickly. Next slide. So just a little bit of background. As many of you will be aware, the European Food Safety Authority issued several opinions for different species in 2009. And many of these opinions demonstrated the challenges that exist currently in the aquaculture industry in terms of animal welfare for fish. And it's also important, I think, to point out that the World Health Organization, the OIE, have also adopted guidelines concerning welfare aspects for stunning and killing of farmed fish. And these are relevant because they form a benchmark for the study which the Commission commissioned regarding the welfare practices currently. It's also relevant because all EU member states are members of the OIE. Next slide, please. So the report that we commissioned was started in 2016. It covered practices during transport and slaughter. The main aims to gather information on practices. So you look at unresolved issues concerning welfare, and also importantly to look at the economic impact for different species, for different methods of slaughter. The species to be covered, and these are the main farmed fish in the EU currently: salmon, carp, rainbow trout, sea bass, and sea bream. So, the report's conclusions, well, just before the previous slide, please. Yeah, the limitations of the report. I think it's also important maybe just to dwell very briefly on the limitations of the report. You know, this was based on data from the Joint Research Centre, the Commission's Joint Research Centre, for a period dating back 5 years. Does it still reflect trends? Unknown. Next slide. Just, I think they're important to bear in mind. The report conclusions. So, there are some obvious conclusions from the report, but I think in general we felt that the current regulation on welfare of fish, farm fish, does provide a framework for national governments to develop guidance for the welfare of farmed fish. And it's particularly, I think, specifically for Atlantic salmon, I think that is well recognised now. Nonetheless, again, coming back to the benchmark that was used in the report, the OIE standards. For Atlantic salmon, I think the report certainly concluded that the welfare for farmed fish was, generally speaking, okay. For the other main species such as carp and rainbow trout, certainly there was variability, and this very much depends on the type of equipment. Again, the actual equipment that's being used is very much in flux in terms of the evolution of the use and types. So there was a lot of variability for those species, and for the sea bream and sea bass, certainly the current methods would not meet OIE standards, i.e. the asphyxiation on ice. Some of the other report's conclusions, clearly production scale plays a huge role in terms of the economics for different methods. Certainly, again, as we've noted, particularly for Atlantic salmon, the industry is evolving. There certainly is a move to different methods. They're refining the methods. So there is continuous improvement, certainly for some species. Clearly, as I said, for the sea bream and sea bass that do not currently meet OIE standards, improvements could be got there. Now, I guess, so in terms of where the Commission stands currently, it certainly considers that given the pace of evolution in terms of the methods that are being developed, that it's not appropriate at this point to propose specific legislative requirements. Next slide, please. In fact, the guidance in terms of welfare or standards, these are currently best achieved at member state level. Nonetheless, yes, given the variability of methods that are used and the variability in terms of the effects on welfare, certainly we feel that research is necessary to develop further, more effective techniques and maybe to harmonise the current methods that are being used in terms of their effect. Yeah, and it's essential, I think, we feel to further develop the stakeholder dialogues in order to look at specific initiatives and projects. And with that in mind, some of you may be aware that on the 21st of June there is a platform meeting concerning welfare, where member states will be invited to present and debate a specific topic that we're talking about today, fish welfare, and explore, well, bring forward contributions which I think will be important for this topic to be developed further. I do know that the Eurogroup who are also hosting this will meet with the Commissioner later, I think in July, it's planned. So there are a number of stakeholder dialogues which are ongoing and will be important to develop this topic. And then the last slide, just for those who want more information, there's a link there at the bottom, which will link to the initial report, which was the Commission produced, and also the report to the Parliament, so further reading there.
Brilliant, thank you, Niall. Didn't even have to tell you 2 minutes. Fantastic. I will now hand over to Katarina Marinou. She is the head of department at the Greek Ministry of Rural Development and Food in the Animal Welfare Division. She has a lot of other hats as well. She's Secretary General of the Hellenic Society of Biomedical and Laboratory Animal Science, Secretary of the Board of the Hellenic Veterinary Medical Society, and a board member at the European Society for Laboratory Animal Veterinarians. And Katerina is here today to talk about welfare in Greek aquaculture and making EU legislation fit for purpose.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Katarina Marinou. I would sincerely like to thank Mr. John Flagg and Eurogroup for Animals for this invitation to attend this meeting and give you a short presentation regarding the situation in Greek aquaculture and what's the level of compliance with the current EU legislation and what could be done next and what is taking place now in Greece right now. So, next slide, please. So, just a brief information that the Greek Ministry of Rural Development and Food, which is based in Athens, is the central competent authority for the implementation of legislation on animal welfare for farm animals, including fish, of course. So this includes, of course, welfare in farms, welfare during transport for commercial purposes, like the one that we discussed today, and welfare at the time of killing. The ministry designs its strategy, which is based on actions derived from legislative texts and other guidelines, even if they are legally binding or not. We of course use now the recent outcomes of the European Commission report to guide in. We use of course the EFSA, plenty of EFSA reports that have been published throughout the years, which is a very useful tool for us. And of course, we also consult and distribute the various stakeholders' approved guidelines, which is of great help for our Greek industry. Here I have noted down our webpage that you can access any documents and any circulars that are issued in Greek language for you to have a look of what is being distributed during the last years to our stakeholders and regional competent authorities. Next slide, please. Which makes a financial outcome of almost €500 million, which is a significant percentage of Greek gross income. Which this means that Greece pays a lot of attention that this sector is very important for the Greek industry, apart from tourism. And so this is of great importance for the Greek government, and we are very happy that we are here today and we are able to present what's going on in this sector, and so that other member states and other stakeholders are informed today. Next, so this works for me. Okay, that's good. I pressed it by chance and it works. That's nice. So, regarding fish transport, there are, as you already are aware of, there are general provisions of the Council Regulation 1/2005, which are fully implemented in Greece, including the provisions of the Technical Rules Annex. So, in Greece, we both have overland transport by truck and sea transport by wellboat, and all commercial people who are involved commercially follow guidelines that are issued and do follow the written recommendations that are there for each species. And of course, it's important to know that the water quality of tanks that are in trucks or wellboats, this is the key point to keep a good welfare. With all the technical provisions that exist. So this is a very good point, that you don't face any major problems with transport of live fish. Okay, regarding practices during killing, of course there are, as you know, the fish follows the general requirements for killing and related procedures of the Council Regulation 1099, which has already been mentioned by a previous speaker. It has been proved by scientific publications that the use of ice slurry is suitable up to a point for sea bass and sea bream. Here you see on the left, you can see a picture of a sea bass, and to the right a picture of a sea bream, which is we are the leaders in the produce of sea bream in Europe. Thank you. However, both the Greek competent authority and Greek farmers are aware of the fact that we need to have an improvement in welfare regarding the use of ice slurry. So a lot of good research in Greece has been currently taking place during the last 5 years in order to improve the methods of sea bass and sea bream stunning. So there are some publications and also some research programs also funded by the European Commission and the Greek government, which has the aim to achieve a stunning of around 10 tons of fish per hour, the effective stunning of at least 95% of fish, which is important because in effective stunning could cause more problems than using the ice slurry itself. The recovery of 100% of fish in case of something goes wrong, and of course an achievement of -3% of losses and alteration of the fish product, because